self-centered joke. Pretty good. All right, we are ready. You guys ready?
Let's roll.
All right, here we go. Hello and welcome to New York Comic Con's Metaverse event, where we are continuing to break the fourth wall to bring convention entertainment to the comfort of your own home. I am Victor Dandridge, the hardest working man in comics, and it is my pleasure to bring to you Making a Man, Violence and Manhood in Comics. Joining me today, Steve Orlando and Phillip Kennedy Johnson. Guys, how are we doing today?
Great, Victor. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm doing
Awesome. Now, the thing that's bringing us all together today is to talk about an upcoming graphic novel that you have coming out called Killaman from Aftershock Comics. I got to read a little sneak peek of it, and it's kind of amazing. Like literally, between the two of you, you've got like a whole library's worth of books under your belt. But Killaman feels like something new, unbridled. What are the roots of this story?
I give Steve the credit for coming up with the premise. Steve and I met over chicken wings and UFC a long time ago. We were doing Albany Con, which is my first doing that convention. I got the impression Steve's been there many times. But
I did live there, so it was, yeah. I'm an old pro in upstate New York.
Didn't want to speak for you, but yeah. So he invited a lot of the comic creators out to a local place, and we had wings and drank and watched the fights, and we learned that more about both of each, more that we were both fight fans, and that I'm a practitioner, and Steve's a wrestling fan from way back and recently discovered MMA, and we geeked out on it. And
nice.
Whenever we meet up again after that at other conventions, the conversation would invariably turn to MMA, and he had this really kick-ass idea for a book. He was, I'll let him explain why, but had a very personal story he wanted to tell through the vehicle of fighting.
Oh, I love it. Steve?
Yeah, I am not a practitioner. I should say that. I'm a huge coward. I'm the team. I'm the resident coward on the team, the creative team. But Phil is right. I had gotten into UFC via my urge as a pro wrestling fan to see Brock Lesnar get his ass kicked at UFC. That did not happen.
Going behind that.
I mean, he was on the juice, so he kind of kicked his own ass. But I also that night saw Amanda Nunes become the first lesbian champion, and she's been defending that and another title of late. Since then, I just became I was hooked on the whole thing. And I had already been a fan of this sort of combat sports narrative, the underdog narrative, the go the distance narrative, things you see like in Rocky and Creed.
Right.
And the way that stories about combat sports can often take really complex emotional journeys and make them almost beautifully simple. Something like Warrior, this like this family struggle embodied by Joel Edgerton and Tom Hardy.
Right.
It comes down, even though it's incredibly complex, it comes down to something really simple, which is like, again, in real life, how cathartic. If only we could just, put the thing we don't like that's bothering us right in front of us and hit it real hard.
Life would be so much easier that way, wouldn't it?
Yes. So I found that very attractive. And coming out of a movie like Creed, where I'd seen the evolution of that underdog narrative, from a blue collar guy in the 70s to a hero for communities of color in Adonis Creed. I was in a phase of my life, and I still am, where when I see a story that should be told, 10 years ago, I said, man, I hope somebody does that. But now I just fucking say, I'm going to do it. So
you're going to do, that's right, man. Power of one.
Yeah. And so I wanted that type of narrative for the queer community. I wanted to make a story that if I saw it when I was younger, I would have been like, you know what, this fight really fucking sucks, but I can keep going. And so that's how it sort of came about. It was the urge to tell that story and also to modernize it and talk about UFC, I should say mixed martial arts in general, because it is fascinating to me, the skill, the technique, the training, the passion, of a sport that is in its relative infancy,
right?
Compared to boxing. We were updating it with a never before seen cultural depiction. I felt that we should update the sports medium as well, to mixed martial arts, and that's probably when I started thinking, man, like it's important that this be authentic to my own experience. But the mixed martial arts side, you know, if we're going to get some crossover readers and we're going to pay respect to all sides of the story, has to be incredibly authentic too.
Of course.
So that's when I approached Phil. He was out of his mind on chicken. He couldn't say no. And we roped him into this book.
That's brilliant. Stylistically, are your approaches to writing, you know, the same, or are the differences kind of like a hidden boon that kind of brings out such a great, compelling story?
We definitely had different perspectives on storytelling and different ways of doing things. And Steve's laughing because we, well, I mean, we both have a clear role in the book. As
right.
well, what we lead on as the writers. There's you know, the big themes of the book are LGBTQ identity and fighting culture. And, you know, both of us, like, I'm the fighter and Steve has very personal stories he wants to tell. And we, yeah, I mean, and then we go over each other's work and kind of homogenize the whole thing and make it all sound like one voice.
You do that very, very well, by the way.
I think in the space between Phil and I is where you get a story that I think speaks to the widest audience possible. You know, Phil is an officer and a gentleman, and I'm a crass sensationalist. So it usually tends to, like, you know, I'll put things in, and it has to be like, you know, reasonably 20% less profane than what I send Phil, and to make it not sound like I'm just burying myself as a sex obsessed idiot. I mean, I would think it's fair to say, Phil, that the same thing usually happens when we have a draft on the technical side of things. Like, you know, he's very good at saying how we can say the same thing, but in a way that's going to speak not just to queer audiences, but just audiences outside the queer community. And likewise, you know, I want to make sure that for people who don't know about mixed martial arts in general, we have enough jargon and technical work to show that we care and it's authentic, but not enough to drive them away. So we really become a really good litmus test for each other. And again, I think it's safe to say, Phil, there's no ideas that are cut, but often we talk about how to say them in a way that is as broadly approachable as possible.
That's totally true. I wouldn't, there's never a scene where I'm like, this has to go. It's more like, there's ways that we say things. Like, we, you know, Steve represents one audience and I represent the other. Like, I don't know, like, there's stuff in there like that he's saying to the LGBTQ community that doesn't speak to me. And I'm coming to the book from the perspective of trying to draw in. There's like jack shit for MMA on shelves right now. Like, there's been the book Heart by Blair Butler and Kevin Allen years ago. And that was years ago. And now there's this. And if you go to conventions, like you might see a small press thing here and again, like maybe like a horror MMA mashup or something. But there's as far as like walking into a comic shop and picking up a book, there's like nothing. And I really take this book very seriously, and that I want to draw in fight fans and be like, this is a book that is not screwing around. It's really authentic as hell. You're going to see moves that you recognize. You're going to hear talk that makes sense to you. And the LGBTQ side of that as well. And I basically, we tone each other down a little, where Steve gets pretty into those conversations where at some point I'm like, this is turning me away as a reader, or would as a reader. Right. And he said that to me as well, for like, okay, I'm nerding out a little bit too much on the technique stuff. He's like, you're losing me. So we just keep each other aware of the other audience in the room, you know.
That's brilliant.
So we've definitely made a book that neither one of us could have done as effectively on our own.
That's awesome. That's the whole point of a partnership like this. That's fantastic. Okay, let's get into the thick of it here. There are aspects of homophobia, toxic masculinity traits, which are easily some of the trickiest subjects to write about. But you jump into this with zero hesitation. And I personally appreciate the authenticity of the characterizations and how that marks people throughout the whole narrative. But was that hard, you know, a hard sell in the topic of production, whether that was, you know, how you wrote it, getting an artist involved, or involving Aftershock?
I mean, I can speak to Aftershock. One thing, and just quickly, like, one thing I say that I appreciate about them all the time, it wasn't hard at all. As a publisher, I find, you know, sometimes you'll have an experience where someone will sort of hem and haw every second before the book comes out. But in my experience, when they decide to do a book, and this goes for this book, but all the stuff I've done for them, which is there's going to be more forthcoming, and there have been things in the past. Once they say yes, man, like they, if they didn't trust the team to do what it said it was going to do, then they would just say no. So like they approved this book, and largely, I shouldn't say largely, completely, they've gotten out of the way, and let us do our thing. On my side, there wasn't a lot of trepidation dealing with the toxic masculinity and the homophobia and the homophobic aspects, because I mean, they're things that I've experienced. They might not be everyone's experience, but they're things that I've experienced,
right?
Either externally or internally. I'm from Central New York. Like I have had my own journey with realizing the sort of bullshit fallacies inherent with a lot of things that people consider "quote unquote" masculine. I'm in my 30s now, but I was once young, dumb, and teenaged. So,
right.
I mean, it all comes from struggles I've had. The lead character is not perfect. I mean, he's on his own journey dealing with, reckoning with his own feelings. And, there's a lot of things that he says that I've never put in a book before that are from my own life. And hopefully that connects with people, hopefully they see that it is a journey, and it's a different journey for everyone. And I think that's really, really important. So, I mean, on my side, I'm just talking about stuff I've seen, experienced myself. Obviously, plastered on the mixed martial arts world, but that's where Phil comes in.
And I'm sure, Phil, I mean, not to totally remove you from, characterizations, because you've clearly written characters that, live different lifestyles than you. But was there an attraction to, a challenge even of so authentically writing about characters that you don't necessarily associate with?
Yeah, it was important to me. I mean, this book meant a lot to me when Steve pitched it. I was like, wow, this is a story that matters. I mean, I always try to tell stories that matter and just dress them up in comic booky ways, put them in a genre thing where, like in the past, I've done stories about human trafficking or, politics in America or whatever. And it can't be just about that. It needs to be in a way that draws the reader in and makes it, makes it more, make it a more compelling visual read, as a comic book. It can't just be, a documentary about something I care about. And this book, this is something that this is an issue I'd thought about, like the fact that male queerness in MMA is kind of like on its face, not a thing right now. Like you would think there are no male gay fighters in MMA, and of course it's not the case. I mean, there are a couple that I know of from other organizations, but UFC is the big show, and to my knowledge, there's no one. And I just find it hard to believe, I guess, and it just kind of has something to say about where we're at, where that culture is at, as a culture that I'm a big part of. Like I know I know a ton of people who either practice it or are way into it, and I think along the lines of the story, if we, if a top contender was suddenly outed as gay, someone right on the cusp of their first title shot, and it's like boom, they get catfished and outed at a press conference, it would be a huge fucking deal,
right? And
honestly, I don't think it would go over great for that person. I think it would be a hard sell for the UFC, for that person and their fight camp. You got somebody who's in a training camp called Alpha Male,
right?
And then something comes out, and then it's like, oh, I'm washing my hair. Like suddenly that person's not as welcome in that camp, or they might lose an endorsement, or they're fans for sure,
right?
And that's kind of sorry. I mean, I don't think everyone would feel that way, but there are certainly people that would, and I wanted to see what that looks like. Like I wanted to see literally what would happen. So
of course,
it's a great way to get into that.
And Phil does a great job too, because it's a lot of the things are never actually spoken. I think of when Michael Sam came out, and it wasn't so much like, oh, this gay football player can't be in the NFL, but no one is really on his side. No one's really helping him, right? So he never really, he doesn't really place that well in the draft. And they're happy to get their, moment of him and Vito making out, when he gets placed. But then a year later, he's kind of nowhere, and no one really covers it. It's kind of like they got their moment, where he's on TV, and there's no real push. He doesn't really have anyone to fall back on. And it's like, oh, it didn't work out. How sad. But the things are systemic, like when you don't have behind you, it's never that simple. And I think that Phil does a great job in this book with how insidious it is, right? You never see the Dana White type be like, well, we can't have a gay champ. So at least certainly not publicly, but things just sort of start to happen, and how
Right.
and you've seen that play out in real life with other sports. I mean, again, Sam is the prime example to me, but it's happened elsewhere as well.
No, that's brilliantly done, and I do hope that people find this as an empowering statement as they possibly could. Another thing about this is family and legacy as an undercurrent through this title. Was that something else that was a big talking point that you wanted to address beyond just an individual struggle, but literally the legacy struggle of carrying on, someone else's name or someone else's effort?
I mean, I'm interested. Phil and I probably have different answers for this, so I'm interested to see what he has to say. But for me, it's like and this is a hyper tense version of a lot of things that people go through when they come out in real life. And again, like, you're always going to get the truth from me. I think it's all horseshit. But parents love to say, oh, like, we support you, but God, we really wanted grandkids. Which, of course, you can have,
right?
But not,
that's not off the table now.
But not the way they want. And so, you're always like, and I've had other people in my family come out, and the narrative amongst my generation is like, well, what would their late father or late grandfather have thought? Who gives a fuck? He's dead. Like, we're alive,
right?
And so this idea of like owning up to the expectations and making good on the expectations of your family. It's real for a lot of people, even if they're not the son of a famous fighter who died for being, in the ring at the hands of someone he was bigoted against. So to me, it's like a sensationalized version of the things a lot of us go through. Like, oh, like, I want to pursue my own interests, my own happiness, but is that counter to my obligation, to my family? And it isn't really, but will it be in their eyes?
Right.
And again, like, I think that's what has always drawn me to these fight narratives in general. I mean, Creed is one of my favorite movies, and it's not because it's a boxing movie. It's because it's about someone who has something inside them that they just have to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no one else in his family understands it. And it's sensationalized in a similar way in that movie, not because, for similar reasons. I mean, he has to fight. And here's Marianne, saying, like,
doesn't want him to at all.
Your father died in the ring, and now you're going to go do this stupid shit. I mean, and it's a little different in Killaman, because it's like, oh, your father was killed by a gay person, and now, like, how could you betray him by being one of them? As if
like you chose it.
And I think that oftentimes, and you'll see that when the book is complete, like, when you come out, those around you act as though it's something you've done to them.
Mm-hmm.
There's an exchange in the back half when James does finally interact with his mother again, and she says, well, do you know how hard this has been for me? And that's very common. And the real answer is, it's not about you at all.
Right.
So I think that those expectations obviously play out in blockbuster format here, but it's something we all go through.
Of course. Phil?
Yeah, as far as family stuff, I have a complicated relationship with my dad, and he just has this commanding intellect. He's like an extremely capable person, but we just are not the same. And he just cares about completely different things. Comics, like, I had these expectations for my life, like had this weird childhood, like trying to raise me to be the next fucking Thomas Jefferson or whatever, like this weird experiment, and my life did not go the way it was intended to go. I can't speak to the kind of stuff that Steve was talking about. He had a very different experience growing up, of course, but I completely understand the need to live your own life and just defy expectations and be like, this is not about you. These are the things that I love to do. These are the things I care about. Yeah, I mean, I know what it's like to just defy expectations from your family and to kind of be cast out because of it. And yeah, I mean, it's really, there are elements in the story that I think people from practically any background can relate to in that regard.
Of course,
like, it's important for people to be who they are and not feel like they have to fulfill someone else's expectations for their life. So
Of course.
this does that for me.
I definitely think that it's super poignant that two, uber talented writers are basically creating the message that says, don't let anyone else tell your story, write your own destiny. That is the point, both of the written form and as well as these characters. Let's talk about Al Morgan for a second, the artist. I'm loving the work that I'm seeing. It's kinetic, graphic presentation is on point, and the storytelling is top notch. What was it like when you got those first pages coming in for Killaman?
It was a relief. No, I mean, I've known Alec. We worked together on Midnighter back in the day, and I knew that he was a mixed martial arts practitioner as well. So when it came time to field the art team for the book and field our co-creators, he delivered everything I expected, but it was really a short list because I wanted, and Phil, we wanted someone who knew their shit just as much as we did.
Right.
And there were a couple options, but Alec, without getting into his background too much, has queer brothers and sisters in his own family. So it seemed to be just the right Venn diagram. And because he wasn't afraid of depicting things in the book that weren't his personal experience. And, there's still an era. I got to remember, this is a weird cut, but I will just always remember when before Watchmen, Dr. Manhattan came out, which beautiful interior work by Adam.
Right.
I think Adam, he's an incredible interior storyteller, but he made sure in all these interviews to talk about how scarring it was for him to have to draw that dick into it for 4 issues. And I was just like, dude, get the fuck over yourself.
It's art school, all over again. It's fine.
And I knew that wouldn't be an issue with Alex. So I knew that he would be full steam ahead on all the content. So for me, and you see that on the page. So for me, it's been a huge win.
No, that's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Phil, did you have any thoughts on when you would see Al's work?
It was great. I mean, Steve is the one who had a relationship with it beforehand. I did not know Alec's work except that, I'd seen on the Midnighter book that Steve wrote. But when he said that Alec practiced MMA, that was a huge win because this book is all about authenticity in all fronts. The fact that we can just kind of have this, this MMA shorthand where we can just talk about, I can, mention a specific moment from a fight. This is like the Dan Henderson knockout of, Michael Bisping or whatever. This is which was epic.
Right. Right.
I digress. Bisping? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's right.
You're out of the book.
I know he's second guessed himself.
Yeah, I did. It's been a minute since that.
No, you were right. You're right.
Yeah, when the Dan Henderson did the flying knockout and toes curled up and all that. Anyway, he's probably watching this now. I'm the jerk.
Authenticity, though. Phil, myself, or both of us will probably kill someone when this book comes out. It's a very reasonable thing.
Part of the marketing. Aftershocks marketing is awesome. We're actually staging a murder.
I mean,
maybe each other. The book's not fully complete yet. So
listen. Aftershock, they are some geniuses. In fact, let's talk about that for a second. When it comes to editorial and the production side of things, has that been a great experience?
Oh yeah, they're great. They've been so supportive. Everything that Steve already said about them being supportive and just letting us tell the story we wanted to tell. And their slogan is "Read dangerously," and they have completely lived up to it in the process.
100%. Absolutely. I'm a huge fan of theirs anyway. Definitely a huge fan of yours. Before we get out of here, any final thoughts that you want to share to the fans?
I'm going to say, especially now that I'm not fully away, but I'm working more on originals versus big stuff. For people that have followed me and love shit like Midnighter, books like Virgil, which came out around the same time, this is to me the ultimate expression of that flavor. For better or worse, I think that I talk about things in my own unique way. I'm not really a feelings guy. I should say a soft feelings guy. People get angry, people get real queer, and things get wild. And for people who like those books, this is my proudest expression of those types of concepts. It might be my final word on this exact concept for a while, just because it's there. The ending of this book, which by the way, I'll quickly say, is not just the product of me or just the product of Phil. It's the perfect expression of co-writing because we basically spent the day arguing about why we were each right and prove that we were each wrong because we came up with something that was better than either of us could have done. And I was being a huge coward, I was like borderline in tears thinking about it being drawn when we first figured it out. So now that it's coming to fruition, I'm super excited. And yeah, if you like those books, you want to know what's next, this is it. So get there and see what happens coming in November.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Phil?
Yeah, I have strong feelings and connections to violence myself. And this book, especially now when we've got shit happening like it's happening, like you know, like literally in the streets, like I see the appeal of real violence and how suddenly you have something that's real and like you could do something that matters and you feel like you're doing this awesome thing. But this is a story about, you know, actual fighters and what it means to be, you know, what it means to be a man. Like, and what do you, you know, just defying expectations for that. And yeah, the book means a lot to me. And yeah, I really hope a lot of people pick it up, like fighters and LGBTQ and everyone else. It's a story that matters.
Absolutely. Well, I definitely will be there day one. Phil, Steve, thank you for sharing your time and talent with all of us today. A special shout out to New York Comic Con for bringing us together. Remember, Killaman will be available in stores as slated for November 25th. But to ensure your copy, get your pre-orders in by November 2nd, at your local comic shop. I'm Victor Dandridge, the hardest working man in comics, saying thank you to all the fans tuning in. Till next time, guys. Peace.
Many thanks, Victor.